Guess what? I started a new quilt. I know you're so surprised, right? I am a sucker for Christmas fabrics. In general, I keep my stash to things I have plans for, but for some reason, that flies out the window when it comes to Christmas prints. I love them. I love to buy them. I always feel like I have this like scarcity mindset. If I don't buy this season, I'll never see it again. But now I have quite a stash of Christmas fabrics. And in this attempt to use it or lose it, like I've been on this use it or lose it kick to try to clean out some of my stash and actually use what I have. The next thing that made sense was to use the Christmas stash. So not only do I have some fun Christmas print projects coming up with tutorials and patterns for you, I also decided to start a new improv quilt. I love improv quilts because they grow as you go. You don't know what's going to happen next from border to border. And the creative part of my brain just thinks it is so much fun. And it also can use a ton of fabric. So I'm going to show you what I have so far. It's right over there. But let me tell you sort of where I'm going with it. So I decided to put some parameters on the project, which just adds a layer of fun, and only use my Christmas stash. If I have to buy anything, it will only be more of this white and red polka dot print, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. But I got my whole stash out. Some things I think are ugly, and I'm going to pass those along, but not very many. So I got my whole stash out, and they actually do tend to sort of coordinate with each other, thankfully, because I can incorporate them into this quilt, which will become a feast for the eyes. There's going to be little things to look at all over it, which I think is really fun. So I decided to make a medallion quilt, which just means that you're starting with a centerpiece and building it out from there. And this is sort of how I built my improv houses, my neighborhood quilt. If you remember, and I can put a link to that playlist. This is what sort of, I feel like that quilt really sort of sparked what my favorite way of quilting is. And it happened because I had made the centerpiece, the apartment building, and I was like, where am I going with this? What am I doing? And then I stumbled on this book at my used bookstore by Gwen Marston, Liberated Medallion Quilts. And ever since then, Gwen Marston is my quilting hero. I have more of her books now. I have this one, Liberated Quilt Making, Free Range Triangle Quilts, and, oh, it's buried under stuff, but Liberated Quilt Making too. So these are really useful resources, and I got these on Thrift Books, which is the used bookstore site, or at my used bookstore Half Price Books. And they're so helpful. So I decided to sort of use her book to find ideas for more borders as this quilt gets larger. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do for the original centerpiece? And then I got an email from Stitched in Color. I like her email newsletter. I think it's like a Substack. But she makes very cool, wonky improv style of quilts. And she had this like star, like a improv star centerpiece, and she made a whole quilt with these blocks because then she sort of log cabined around them. So I used that for inspiration for the center, and now I'm building it out. So today's video, I'm going to show you how I'm making the tree shapes, and then I'm going to pick some centerpieces. Let me just show you what I have so far. I'm Nikki, this is Pinkhead, so let's get started on a new improv quilt together. So this center block right here was inspired by that Stitched in Color quilt. And I will, if I can, put a link to the Substack, or at least if she has it on Instagram, I will too. So I picked this print for the center, and I like this print because it has the traditional red and green, which most of my fabrics are, but I also have some Christmas fabrics that have teal and pink. So this centerpiece sort of anchors the entire thing, and it lets me use all the colors in my stash. And so I have already an improv star tutorial that I will link you to. I made some little ones a couple Christmases ago, and these are just improv half square triangles mostly. This is like a rectangle, but if you know how to make the center star, the improv stars, you'll know how to do this part also. And then I just built it out log cabin style, and I tried to put in some little pieces of interest. I really want this almost to become like an I Spy type of quilt where you're always finding something. And so then I moved on to the next borders that I wanted to make, and I decided to do some improv triangles in order to look like Christmas trees going on the sides, and then I will make, these will be called cornerstones. So when you have something in the corner, it's called a cornerstone. And so that's what I'm going to work on today. 2 more rows of trees for the sides, and then choosing what to do in the corners. Okay, I also want to show you what I have done with my fabrics, and then as I go and I make scraps, I put the scraps in this bin. So I have sort of like sections to work from, and I'm not digging through and having to reorganize them constantly. I can just fold it and stick it back in the fanned out. Improv quilting can be really messy, but that's just kind of part of the fun. Okay, so here's how I'm making these freeform tree lines. I'm using Gwen's technique, and I just freehand cut a bunch of triangles from my fabric. I did not use a ruler, but if you're really bad at cutting straight, then you might want to. But they are supposed to be all different sizes and sort of wonky shapes. And then I cut a 6-inch strip of this background fabric. The reason I might buy more of just this one is because for a quilt like this, you really need like a good amount of darks, mediums, and lights. And I don't have very many lights, and I think it's going to need that separation. But this is just a Hobby Lobby fabric, and so I can easily get some more if I decide I want to. So this might be my one concession to buying something new for this quilt. But anyway, I'm going to, so I cut this strip of fabric. I want my finished one to be 5.5, but I cut this 6 because it needs trimmed at the end as it gets a little bit wonky. So I'm just gonna start on the left and make my first tree. Actually, first I need to measure how big I need this because it was different. Okay, I need it to be 19 inches. So my strip is as long as I could make it, and I might have to supplement with some of the triangles I already cut off, which is these. But I cut enough trees to get me started. So I'm just going to put my first tree down right here, and I'm going to first sew this side onto it. So I'm gonna cut right along the edge of it. I'm gonna turn this part, so these edges are meeting. And because it's an angle, you want some overhang at the bottom. If you don't leave overhang, then your tree ends up above the bottom of your piece. So about 1/4 inch of overhang down there, and I'm just gonna sew straight along that line. Okay, so I sewed that on. Now I can press it. And now I'm going to put it back down on my strip, and I'm gonna make sure that this underneath fabric is going to, like when I, it's hard to explain. When I cut this, I don't want there to be a huge gap at the top. So it needs to overlap enough that my cut is still on this background piece. So now I'm gonna cut along this other side of the tree. I'm gonna discard this little piece and also this piece underneath. And I will try to incorporate these triangles into future elements of the quilt so it's not wasteful. I feel like a lot of people have a problem with improv quilting because they say that it's wasteful. But these scraps always get used for other quilts or other things, or even in this quilt. So it's kind of the nature of improv. You have some cutting off. If you don't like that, I feel like, I don't know, creative thinking can eliminate waste and help you use it in other things. So now I'm going to just flip this over. And again, I'm going to make there be some overhang down here, and I'm just gonna go sew it onto my large strip. All right, so now I can add my next tree. I'm gonna add this littler one. And some of them I overlap a little bit more than others. This one I'm just gonna overlap a tiny bit and do the same thing. So now I'm going to cut alongside this tree, flip the tree and sew it on. And at this point, because I know this strip isn't gonna be long enough anyway, it can be helpful to try to use some of these triangles. If there is one that is a similar angle, like this one should work. So it needs to go upside down like this. So I can flip this here and cut alongside and stitch. And that worked out nicely too. So now I need to find a tree though that's a similar angle to this. That one's a little bit too not sharp enough. But this one will work. So now I can just put this one on here. I might unsew this. If you were making triangles that are not wonky and you want them to be precise, you can simply cut the same shape from both the trees and the background fabric and just stitch them together. It would need to be a pretty precise triangle, I think. I haven't tried it. I just like wonky better. Okay, let me go stitch this tree on. Now you can sort of see why I made my strip larger than it needed to be, because it is going to need trimmed. See how crooked it's getting at the top and bottom? Okay, I'm gonna go back to using my strip. Okay, so I'm gonna put this tree at the bottom and cut it alongside it and stitch here. I'm gonna keep going in this way until my piece measures 19 inches. Okay, as you reach the end, you kind of have to gauge how big of a last tree you're gonna need. So let me sew this on and then I'll decide if this is the right size or not. Okay, so where am I at? 19 is right here. So I actually think that's gonna end up perfectly. Not sure how I did that. All right. Might need a larger piece for the end just so I have plenty to trim, but let's see. Okay, now I can trim it up. So I know I already have a very straight edge on this side that I started with, and that's remained straight this entire time. So I'm gonna take my long ruler and I'm going to trim across the top first. Nope, I wanna trim across the bottom first. So let me go this way because I wanna keep as much tree as I can. Hopefully there's enough space. Oh yeah. So I'm just gonna trim it where it needs to be straight on the bottom. So I'm lining my straight edge up with my ruler over here, and I'm gonna trim all of this off. And then it needs to be 5.5 inches tall to match the other panels. But you know what? If it weren't, it wouldn't really matter that much because this is improv. So with improv quilting, you just work with your mistakes instead of trying to correct them, and sometimes that results in the most creative parts of your quilt. See, look, I did not get a full 5.5 this way. So these trees are just gonna have to be 5.25. It's because I used that extra triangle in there. That's okay. So the top and bottom rows are gonna be 5.5. The side borders will only be 5.25. And then I can trim the whole piece to 19 inches because that's how long I needed it to be. So I'm gonna make sure it's nice and lined up, trim it at the 19-inch mark. And there is my third strip of trees. They're so cute. Let's go put them on the design wall and see what they look like. Okay, there's what it looks like. So a minute ago when I said I was gonna measure how big I needed it, whenever you're measuring with a medallion quilt, you want to measure the piece through the middle. So I measured my center block not on the edge because the edges can warp and stretch and they might be different when they're hanging up here like this. So I measured it down the center and I got a perfect fit. And I did the same this way. It was a little bit bigger this way. And I got a perfect fit that way too. Okay, so I need to make one more strip of trees and then I'm going to do something fun for the cornerstone blocks. And then we'll go from there. The next step before I can sew this part together is to create cornerstones, and I know just what block I want to make. If you're new here, I actually have some books I have written about improv quilting. And this is the first one I did, Improv Houses. I have Curvy Improv and I have Make It Wonky. And for this block, I'm going to make the Churn Dash block from my own book. This is a very helpful guide on how to turn traditional quilt blocks into improv quilt blocks. So I will link these. There's the physical version that I ship only to the US, and then there's a digital version that you can print out also. And they're just really helpful for making traditional blocks wonky. So here is the Churn Dash page. I'm going to use my own instructions to remind myself what to do. First, I need to choose some center squares, and this is the fun part because I have all of these fun novelty fabrics. So I'm going to try some on and decide. Because the background of the trees is light, I think I want to go with something darker for the middle of the Churn Dash. Look at this fun. Should I make them like these big nutcracker heads? I don't know if I have any that aren't. Oh, I have him and her. I actually think these pictures are too big. All right, I'll save these for another part. Ooh, I think I like this. I'm gonna start introducing some of the mints and greens. Okay, I'm gonna use this for a centerpiece. So I just need to cut squares. They can be wonky squares, but I'm gonna make them regular squares. I guess I should. Okay, let me think through this with you because I need to know how big to make these, but remember this one is 5.5 and this one is 5 1/4. To make this easier on myself, I'm just gonna cut these to 5 1/4 also. So then I just need to make 5 1/4 inch squares. So I don't want my center square to be very big, maybe only like 2 to 2.5 inches. Okay, I have this pre-cut cardboard square that I already put a sticky dot on. So I'm gonna use this to fussy cut some of these pictures in 3-inch squares. I like the ice skate. I like the tree. It's a new day. Yesterday I could tell that I was tired. My brain was like not functioning with the math that I needed to be doing for this block. So I have a fresh mind today. So let me show you what I decided. Okay, I'm crooked because the sun is shining through my window. The leaves fall off the tree outside and then it just shines really brightly, and the curtains are gone because we're selling the house. So anyway, I decided because the block is going to be pretty small, only 5 1/4 inches, I'm going to do, instead of the Churn Dash, I'm going to do a shoe fly, which basically looks like this. It doesn't have the bars, and I think I'll save the Churn Dash for a bigger section of the quilt. But I need to, so basically the block needs to be divided into thirds. I'm again going to make it slightly larger and then I can just trim it down. So I need to cut my center squares just a tad smaller. I also am just not sure I like Santa being cut off like this, but I don't know, maybe I should do the pine cone. Yeah, I'll stick with Santa. Now for each block, I also need a background piece, and I'm gonna keep using this red and white polka dot just for continuity. And I think I can probably squeeze some of these out of these scrap triangles because I need 8 for each block. So 8 times 4, 36. That's a lot for 4 blocks, don't you think? Let's see what I can do. Okay, so I have some blocks to build now. I have my 4 centers and I have 8 background blocks for each one. To make a shoe fly block, I need to turn these into triangular corners, the 4 corners like this. So I have a strip of my corner fabric, and I'm going to take those 4 corners and I'm just going to place them on this strip like so, and I'm going to feed this through the machine and just sew down my line. My background fabric is kind of see-through so I can see it. If it weren't, you can trim this off if you really need to. I don't want them to be precise. I want them to be a little bit wonky, so I'm going to angle them a little bit differently, like this. I have lost my pin cushion. It's probably buried under all this. Oh, found it. Normally I would just go take this whole thing over the machine and add the squares on as I sew, but since I'm demonstrating, I'll do it over here and I'll put some pins. Okay, I'm just gonna go sew down the line and stop here. Now I'm going to go press this so that everything flips toward this way, so the seam is toward the strip. Okay, so now I have this. And now I can simply cut out my triangles using the existing square as my guide. You can cut this off if you want to. I probably will. And these we're gonna set aside for the next one. Okay, so these scraps can become the triangles for the next blocks, and I still have some of this strip left too, so when I do this method, I try to use everything that I can, that I cut off. So here's my finished wonky triangles. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off to reduce the bulk, and let me arrange them how I want them. So the blanks go on the sides, on top and bottom, and then these shoe fly corners go here like this. And then you simply sew them all together. Okay, here's my finished shoe fly, 1 of 4. Love it, so cute. Now I just need to trim it down to 5 1/4 inches. Barely made it big enough, but that's okay. I'm not going to, ooh, it'd be fun to do it crooked. Look how cute, I love it. I'm gonna go put it in the corner, and then I'll make 4 more, and then I'll show you what it looks like so far. Maybe I'll sew what I have so far together. Upside down. It's upside down. First seam ripping of the quilt. That's probably it for this video, but I'm gonna keep working on this. You can follow along on Instagram, Pin Cut Sew on Instagram, if you want to see the progress. But what I really hope is that you're inspired to try something similar, some kind of improv medallion quilt. You don't need any fancy skills. You can always, if you don't have books like I have, you can just look up different elements online. I have some videos, like I have the wonky star video, and I also have the book somewhere. So I'll link you to the book for sure so you can start. But I want to address the issue of it right now being a square. And I want it to be a rectangle. Of course you can make a square quilt, but I want it to be a rectangle. So you can address this at any point during the quilt process. You can make your centerpiece a rectangle, or you can, with one of the border elements, you can make it wider at the top and bottom, then you make it on the sides, and that will start to elongate it. Or you can wait till the last layers and you can add a larger border on the top and the bottom. I have done that before with Layla's flower garden quilt. And so you can change the shape as you go. One more tip is that at some point, like right now, I think it's about 25 or 30 inches across. And it is easiest when you start to add blocks. Like say I was gonna add a 4-patch block. And if I wanted it to fit perfectly, which it doesn't have to, in Gwen Marston's book, she talks a lot about that. And she even gives examples of antique quilts where things are not like, they'll make like a flying geese border and the top goose is just chopped off because that's how it fit. So you don't have to try that hard to make them fit, but if you want them to, then it is easiest to make it, to add borders in certain measurements so that you're always dealing with some kind of even number. The worst is when you accidentally end up with a prime number on accident and you can't make it fit and you really have to kind of creatively think through how to deal with it. But you can. The fun part about improv is that you challenge your mind to make your mistakes into elements and not try to fix every little thing or make it perfect. So I hope you're inspired. I can't wait to see what becomes of this. I think because I've been using this light color, next will be a darker color border of some kind. So yeah, it's super fun. I'll see y'all later. Bye.